Now, one of the things that I would love to do with this channel is talk about some really interesting character builds. Now, I'm not really interested in the game breaking, you use this combination there and you just can't be defeated kind of possibilities, but I really like some of the ones that give you an interesting character build, something that brings out narrative, or something that's just quite a useful trick that you can use in certain ways. And, it might not make you overpowered, but you excel at one thing. Now, what I'm looking at this time is it possible to make a character almost impossible to catch or imprison by conventional means? Now, this is something that I discovered with my Warlock character that I didn't intend, but just as I was starting to pick abilities and traits and things, I suddenly realized, oh, I'm headed for something really interesting here. So what we're looking at is a character that is really hard to lock up. Now, this is the sort of trick you can use on a range of different kinds of characters. So it could be something you did with rogues, it could be something you did with casters, it would work really well with, but there's lots of other classes that you can do. Now, the first thing you want to get into your toolkit is the spell Misty Step. Now, this is just a great utility cantrip for getting out of a tight situation. It's a verbal-only spell which allows you to teleport 30 feet to somewhere you can see as a bonus action. So you can just blink, gone there, I'm here. Nightcrawler from X-Men. And it's the sort of thing that can very easily get you out of a grapple. You can just jump out of someone trying to hold you down, or if you are in the stocks or something like that, you could beam yourself out. You don't actually need to use your hands because it's verbal only. And it's probably up to the DM's discretion if you are, say, tied up, if the ropes come with you. But at the very least, you can get yourself a little bit out of trouble, a little bit distant. And a lot of DMs would probably be comfortable saying, well, yes, if it gets you out of shackles, it'll also get you out of ropes. That's up to the DM's discretion, but certainly it's a good start. Now, the catch is there's lots of things you can do about that. You can stop someone casting Misty Step just by putting a gag in their mouth. You can knock them unconscious. You can cast the sleep spell. You can cast a silent spell. There's lots of different ways you can prevent someone from using their little teleport trick. So it's not game breaking at that point. It's a useful thing for a thief to have, and it's the sort of thing that you can get a whole bunch of different ways. There's a feat that gives you Misty Step. There is a race that gives you Misty Step, the Eladrin. There's lots of different class specializations that'll give it to you. But it's not game breaking as is. There are, however, a few ways you can make it more powerful. And one of the first ones is when you get an option of a feat that you're not using to get Misty Step, get the Metamagic Adept feat. Now that allows you to borrow some special powers from the Sorcerer class. And in particular, what you want is the Subtle spell. That will give you 2 times per long rest that you can cast a spell completely removing the verbal or somatic components. When you've got a spell like Misty Step, which only has a verbal component, that means you can just will it to happen. So twice a day, even if you are gagged or you have a silent spell or you're underwater and can't speak, you can just will yourself to teleport and go. Now that's quite useful for something like a thief. And this is the sort of thing that you could do as an interesting character build, but these things would also work as a really interesting villain idea as well. Either a big bad or possibly just a bit of an arch nemesis character, someone who keeps coming in and out as an NPC that's sort of a mischievous, sometimes villain, sometimes ally. And a thief or something like that that you cannot catch. Maybe the party is tasked to bring him down and they just can never quite get a beat on him. Could be a really interesting character. So that's a useful combination. But there is, again, more you can do with it. That's the sort of most basic, can be accessed by a lot of different classes, but let's talk about the gold standard of how do you make a character super, super hard to imprison and very, very good at escaping at will. The gold standard you want to take a warlock character, give them an Archfey patron, take Pact of the Tome, and get to at least level 7. Now, what does this give you? Firstly, it gives you not just subtle Misty Step, it gives you subtle Dimension Door. Now, that just doesn't take you 30 feet to somewhere you can see. Dimension Door takes you 500 feet to anywhere you know about, or even just a direction. So if you are locked in a prison with a gag in your mouth, that is a huge distance that you can get yourself out. But there's other perks. Now, the reason I said take Pact of the Tome is because if you take Pact of the Tome for a warlock, you can also get the aspect of the moon Eldritch Invocation. And what that means is you can't be made to sleep by any means. Now, a DM might say that doesn't include unconsciousness, but as a general rule, in a lot of cases, you probably find that means it's almost impossible to render you asleep or unconscious, so they can't knock you out, they can't gag you. No matter what they do, in conventional terms, you can still use your at-will Dimension Door to just go, and you're 500 feet away. The advantage of taking the Archfey patron is at 7th level, you also have access to greater invisibility. And with 2 spell slots, what that means is you can use your Dimension Door, jump out your 500 feet, and then cast greater invisibility on yourself. Which I should say is also verbal and somatic only, which means you don't need any components. So if you've been locked up in prison and you have nothing to your name, you can still turn yourself perfectly invisible. You can still attack people and manipulate doors and sneak your way out of the rest of the prison if you haven't reached the edge. Or, alternatively, if you'd rather just get away fast, another thing the metamagic feat would allow you to do is take the distance spell capability. And that would allow you to double the range of any spell. And because Dimension Door specifically says 500 feet is the range, that would mean you could do your initial jump 500 feet, even if you're gagged. Try and get the gag out of your mouth at that point, and then you could use that spell again to get you another 1,000 feet. And within the space of 20 seconds, you are 1,500 feet away from the prison, and they have no idea where you've gone. Now, there's 2 other bonuses that go with this particular build of character. One is that at 6th level, you get this thing called Misty Escape. That means when you take damage, you can teleport up to 60 feet, just like Misty Step, and you turn invisible for a round. So even if you are very down on spells, or if you only have 1 spell left and you want to conserve it, maybe use it for greater invisibility once you're out of the cell, you could go them into punching you, and you would immediately trigger Misty Escape. You jump 60 feet and vanish, and you can then cast greater invisibility on yourself and scamper out of the dungeon however you want. And they're left with the fact that you have tricked them into helping them escape by punching them and triggering their power. And the last bonus, it's not something that happens at level 7, but if you get all the way to level 10, then a warlock with the Archfey patron actually becomes immune to charm and can reflect charm effects back. So that's yet another way to control you or limit you or stop you escaping that is now off the table. So yeah, it's a really interesting character build. It's not necessarily going to win the game for you because most of what it has is escaping, but it's a really interesting trick that you can build into a character and also would make for a really interesting villain. A warlock character that is almost impossible to bring to justice. And you could have this really cool mission early on where this character is supposed to be hunted down and caught, and the PCs just keep failing to do it and he keeps slipping out. And then maybe that's a character that you later on you bring back and you make an ally against a bigger foe later on. So there's lots of interesting things you can do with that. And at that point, you're actually looking very high level magic to be able to prevent them escaping. You are looking at permanent polymorph or flesh to stone or something like that to even stop them getting out of prison. Which makes for a really interesting character and a really interesting narrative element. So what do you think? Is this a really interesting idea you'd like to try? In DMs, is that something that would make for an interesting villain character or an NPC that you want to play with? I'm certainly going to be giving some of these ideas a go with my character because she has found herself in quite a hostile situation and is probably going to want to get herself out of prison in the future. So I'm going to have some ideas as time goes on about how it goes. Feel free to give it a go yourself and let us know how it worked for you. Let us know in the comments. Thanks for listening.